Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته, everyone. Welcome to our three-part series on the Quran, reading the Quran with the Maqasid lens, with our dear Dr. Jasser Auda. I'm just going to read a quick bio of the professor, inshallah, and we'll get started. So Dr. Jasser Auda, as many of you know, is a renowned global authority and distinguished scholar in the field of Maqasid al-Sharia. He's a founding and board member of the International Union of Muslim Scholars. He's a member of the executive board of the Fiqh Council of North America, a member of the European Council for Fatwa and Research, and a fellow of the Islamic Fiqh Academy of India. He has a PhD in the philosophy of Islamic law from the University of Waterloo in Canada. I beg your pardon, a PhD in the philosophy of Islamic law from the University of Wales, and a PhD in systems analysis from the University of Waterloo in Canada. Early in his life, Dr. Jasser has memorized the Quran and studied fiqh, usul, and hadith in the halakas of Al-Azhar Mosque. He was a founding director of the Maqasid Center and the Philosophy of Islamic Law in London, a founding deputy director of the Center for Islamic Ethics in Doha. He has held several teaching positions at the University of Waterloo, Alexandria University in Egypt, Islamic University of Novi Pazar, the Qatar Faculty of Islamic Studies, and the American University of Sharjah. He lectures in Islamic law, ethics, and thought around the world, and he has written over 24 books in Arabic and Islamic language, and mashallah, some of those books have been translated into 25 languages. And of course, Dr. Jasser was my teacher when I studied at Qatar. May Allah reward him. It's so good to be here and be with my teacher and share with you really the knowledge that really changed my life. May Allah preserve him. May Allah bless him. Assalamu alaikum. Without further ado, Dr. Jasser Auda.
الله يكرمك ما شاء الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام على رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. ورضي الله عن المهاجرين والأنصار ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين.
Did you get my phone, Baba?
Just a point of organization, if everybody could mute their mics, inshallah. It's such a pleasure to be back with my sister Ajarat on this forum. I remember meeting her in California. It was quite some time ago. And after my lecture, she said, I want to study this thing. So I just gave her a business card. I didn't know much. And then, lo and behold, I see her in my office there in Doha. Got a scholarship and came there to study. That's how one lecture kind of changed her life. I hope to the better. I'm always praying that this is to the better, inshallah. That lecture was an introduction to the issue of Maqasid, or the objective, purpose, and based kind of approach to Islam. And as you see in this series here, we will have, inshallah, three themes. One about the centrality of Maqasid in the Quranic logic and structure. So this is this lecture in which we discuss the idea of reading the Quran with objective in mind. Is this a Quranic idea? Is this something that is authentically Islamic? Or is this some bid'ah approach that we are taking? The second theme has to do with the Maqasid-based thematic interpretation. So towards the end of this presentation, hopefully we get to some themes that we will take as a guide to a different reading of the Quran that is for next time. And then the third time, we're going to discuss, inshallah, a framework for Islamic scholarship. If we would like to apply Islamic scholarship for our time and develop it in a way that is useful for the cause of Islam, the cause of humanity of our time, what is the groundwork for this, the methodological groundwork based on these readings? So as time permits, inshallah, we'll cover as much as I can. Now, there is no doubt about the centrality of the Quran in the message of Islam. And I will not spend time on this. But the Quran is Islam, really. And the Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam himself is an illustration of that Quran, as the Quran is saying. And therefore, this is Islam. This is the core of Islam. Everything else is human in the sense of right and wrong, in the sense of changeability with the change of time and place. The Islamic history is not Islam. The Islamic schools of law are not Islam. The Islamic tariqas of Sufism are not equal to Islam. They are all part of Islam, manifestations according to the dimension of history and geography. We can discuss that in a different lecture. But we are talking now about the core of Islam, about what Islam is, the Quran, and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a living Quran, as an example of the Quran. Now, the centrality of Maqasid in the revelation is the claim I'm making here. And then the proof of that is simply to read the Quran. When you read, you will see that the objectives are the logic of the Quran. There is nothing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran without giving us an objective for it. He created the human and jinn to worship him. That is the objective. He sent the trials to humanity in order for humanity to achieve a better state, in order to learn from their lessons, in order to correct their mistakes, for the differentiation of the good people and the evil ones. He, subhanahu wa ta'ala, had sent the books and the messengers so that people could believe and worship Allah. So that, the word so that, or in Arabic, la'alla, or in the other Arabic expression, lam, or min ajli, or all of the Arabic expressions that mean the rationale, the reason, for the cause of, for the purpose of. All of this is all over the Quran. So when we talk about the maqasid, or the objectives, the objectives of the Sharia is a historical fiqh topic that is not really the topic of this course, by the way, which is how the fuqaha had developed a theory of the higher objectives of the Sharia, according to these levels of necessities and needs and luxuries, and according to different dimensions and so forth. But this is not the topic here. The topic here is the real objectives, from which these other objectives stemmed, according to this place and time anyway. That's a different topic. But the real ones, the ones in the Quran, I'm claiming here that when you open the Quran, and we will exercise that, inshallah, in the next half hour, when you open the Quran and read the verses with this logic in mind, the logic of looking for the purpose, the objective, the why. Why did Allah send the book? So that it is guidance for those who have acquired taqwa. Okay, why are we fasting? So that we acquire taqwa, and so forth. If I move to some of the ayat, now we read these ayat. كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. Fast is decreed so that you may become righteous, or you have heedfulness, or however you translate taqwa. And taqwa is a higher and bigger purpose of the Quran. Now, if you look for taqwa in the Quran, you will see it in hundreds of places as a purpose, not just for fasting and not just for prayers, but for many other things. يا أيها الناس اعبدوا ربكم, that second verse in front of you, الذي خلقكم والذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. So ibadah, u'budu, ibadah, is actually a means to achieve taqwa. And ibadah is a huge concept as well in Islam. Everything we do is ibadah to achieve that taqwa. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the children of Israel, خُذُوا مَا أَتَيْنَاكُمْ بِقُوَّةٍ وَاذْكُرُوا مَا فِيهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. When you take the book with strength, you achieve taqwa. You go towards taqwa. Therefore, if you wish, we can draw a network of meanings around that maqsid that is called taqwa. And if you do that, I'm saying there will be hundreds of links in that network in which taqwa manifests in a holistic way, in a holistic manner, because we are looking not at taqwa in the verse as the grammar of it, or the tajweed of it, taqwa, qalqala, ta, that we're going beyond that into a higher and holistic and principle-based and objective-based way of looking and reading the Quran. Let's take another example. The worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. So Allah created us, humans and jinn, for ibadah. Now, if you look for ibadah, you will find it as a higher purpose you can achieve through a number of means throughout the Quran. If you look at next slide, Islahul Ard, or the rectifying of earth, you will find a number of means. How can we rectify earth? Through a number of means that the Quran is giving us. So therefore, if you look at the Maqasid, why are we looking at the why here? The Maqsid is the why, the reason. Why are we looking at the why? A number of reasons. Let me start with, because they are important in changing the mindset of Muslims towards a more Quranic and a more authentic mindset. The why is the future. When I look at why am I doing this, I'm looking at achieving something in the future versus the cause or the causality thinking, which is looking at the past. Something happened in the past that is causing the present to be the reality. But with the why, I'm looking from the present towards a future. And that is a different way of thinking. So when I'm looking at taqwa here, I'm looking at how to achieve taqwa in my future, or ibadah, or the rectification of earth, or all of the other maqasid, the dignity, the preservation of life, all of the other maqasid that we are going to quickly discuss. We are actually looking for something in the future to achieve. That futuristic thinking is very important because we tend to look to the past as Muslims, and we rarely have a future plan, let alone a good future plan. And the way we manage many of our lives and many of our Islamic organizations is a crisis management, kind of like the past is pushing us to really do something because they did this, therefore we do that, rather than having a futuristic way of planning and strategy towards which we strive. Therefore, it's very important to read the Quran with a strategic eye, with a future eye. Secondly, a critical eye. When you ask why, you are critiquing. Why is COVID-19 a problem? You are criticizing many things. Your understanding, of course, yes, it is a virus and it is deadly and it causes certain things in the blood, etc., etc. But why is it an issue? That why is a critical question. Why is it more of an issue in America than in Germany or than in other places? And therefore you get to questions of policy, perhaps questions of economy. Why are people starving because of COVID-19? Well, because they have to work to eat. Well, there is a problem with that concept. From an Islamic point of view, humanity is not supposed to starve if they don't work for 3 days or for 2 weeks. That is something wrong in the system itself. So the critical approach to Islam, whether individually or collectively, even individually, when the Prophet ﷺ said that, because fasting is for taqwa, the meaning of what he said. Therefore, the fasting person, if he doesn't stop falsehood and lying and so on, then Allah doesn't need him to stop eating and drinking. There is no need to be thirsty and hungry if you are not going to be a better person, because being a better person is the why of the fasting, you see. So that is a critical question when you start to ask why. The question of why is also a holistic question. When I look at ar-Rahmah or mercy, that is an overview of what Islam is about. And that involves many things. I'm not just looking at one rule versus one situation, and I'm trying to apply the rule to the situation in a partialistic way, which is a problem we have in the Islamic education approach in general. When we used to memorize the Quran, I mean, the Shaykh would start from the beginning of the verse and ask us to continue, the middle of the verse, sometimes starting from the middle of the word, and is asking us to remember the rest of the word. And it's a very partialistic way of memorizing the Quran. I don't remember our Shaykh rahimahullah anyway, but I don't remember him telling us, okay, give me all the ayat where there is rahmah. Do you remember that? Or give me all the ayat that links salah to zakah. Or what is really, why is the sequence of the stories this way? You see, so there is no holistic approach to the Quran, and it's partialistic. And when it comes to hadith as an illustration of the Quran, it becomes much more problematic, where we take a hadith out of the context and out of the other narrations and out of who the narrator is and what they are trying to do and where they said this and why. And we take the hadith out of nowhere and apply it to the reality just like that. That becomes quite problematic. And the holistic Maqasid approach is an approach that is totally antithetic to all of the partialistic approaches. I will move quickly to a few other places where al-Maqasid is clear in the reading. الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا. He is the one who created death and life so that he would test you. So testing is a natural thing. It's actually a maqsad. It's an objective from creating death and life. And testing itself is an objective so that he differentiates. In another verse, Allah says, لِيَمِيزَ اللَّهُ الْخَبِيثَ مِنَ الطَّيِّبِ. He will differentiate the evil ones from the good ones. He will differentiate people with good hearts from people with hearts otherwise. And therefore, trials then becomes an objective and a universal law. And I will talk about universal laws at some point. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the other verse, he said, وَلَقَدْ صَدَقَكُمُ اللَّهُ وَعْدَهُ إِذْ تَحُسُّونَهُم بِإِذْنِهِ حَتَّى إِذَا فَشِلْتُمْ وَتَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ وَعَصَيْتُمْ مِن بَعْدِ مَا أَرَاكُمْ مَا تُحِبُّونَ مِنكُم مَّن يُرِيدُ الدُّنْيا وَمِنكُم مَّن يُرِيدُ الْآخِرَةَ ثُمَّ صَرَفَكُمْ عَنْهُمْ لِيَبْتَلِيَكُمْ وَلَقَدْ عَفَا عَنكُمْ. So he is talking about the events that happened in that battle that he is mentioning in Surah Al-An'am. And he is saying that you had problems amongst yourselves. You had tanazu'. Tanazu' is conflicts. You had too many conflicts amongst yourself. He's talking about the society at that time of the Prophet ﷺ. And minkum man yuridu dunya wa minkum man yuridu al-akhirah. Some of you want the dunya and some of you want the akhirah. Remember, we know that in the society of the Prophet ﷺ, there were hypocrites, munafiqun. They did not want al-akhirah, they did not want the deen. They are there for the dunya, for the material gain. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent the trial in order to differentiate. لِيَبْتَلِيَكُمْ. He is differentiating the good from the evil. He's differentiating the hypocrites from the believers. And he is giving the believers an opportunity to unite because they had too many conflicts that did not allow them to win the war. So they lost that war in order for them to unite and to come together. وَاللَّهُ ذُو فَضْلٍ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bounties over the believers. Because of these purposes that he has, subhanahu wa ta'ala. كذلك يتم نعمته عليكم لعلكم تسلمون. Surah Al-Nahl, which is one of the surahs that two of your groups will study part of. It's called Surah Al-Ni'am, the surah of the bounties. Why? Because Allah mentioned so many bounties in the surah, and every time, as you will read, inshallah, in the half hour of exercise, every time he mentions a bounty, he's saying why he's giving us this bounty, and why of the why as well. كذلك يتم نعمته عليكم لعلكم تسلمون. So he is giving us the mountains and the shelters and so forth, so that he would complete or perfect his favor, subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that we might submit. We submit when we see how much He perfected His favor on us, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the next slide, would be sallallahu alaihi wasallam a warner, subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that people would have knowledge that He is one, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and وَلْيَتَذَكَّرَ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. This warn is bigger Maqasid that you read as you read. لِيُنذِرَ بَأْسًا شَدِيدًا مِنْ لَدُنْهُ وَيُبَشِّرَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And therefore the Quran is there for the sake of warning and glad tidings or good tidings. And the Quran itself is in Arabic for a number of reasons. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ. It's in Arabic, and Arabic is a clear expression. أُعْرِبُ عَلَيْكُمْ means to make myself clear. That clear expression is for the sake of reasoning, and for the sake of remembering, and for the sake of reflecting, and so forth. لَعَلَّهُمْ بِلِقَاءِ رَبِّهِمْ يُؤْمِنُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does certain things for people to believe. Maybe they might believe. And that is a purpose, subhanahu wa ta'ala, in this ayah of revealing the scriptures and for guidance and so forth. And in other verses, other things that He does, subhanahu wa ta'ala, for us to believe. Reminder, there are a number of things that He, subhanahu wa ta'ala, is doing as reminder. التعارف, the famous verse, يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا. We have created you from male and female and made you peoples and tribes so that you might know one another. So what I am saying is that there is nothing in the Quran when you read that does not have a clear why, as we read in these verses, or sometimes a more implicit why, which is what I would like to take a few minutes with you to discuss. And then eventually the next two lectures, we will discuss the more implicit why of the Quran. The clear ones we will do as an exercise, inshallah, in the break. But before that, let me read perhaps the Fatiha and look at the more implicit whys of the Fatiha. Why is the Fatiha like that? And what does it build in the foundation of our hearts when we read the Fatiha those 19 times every day, and it is the beginning of the Quran, it's the biggest, the most important surah, etc. When Allah says Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of Allah, this ism, let us read not like the previous slides, let us read slower a little bit. In the name of Allah, name, bism, wasm. إن في ذلك لآيات للمتوسمين. There will be signs for those who look for signs. Al-ism is a label for a certain sign, and is a word that has authority. The other verses are saying, إن هي إلا أسماء سميتموها أنتم وآباؤكم ما نزل الله بها من سلطان. They are words or names that you have given your idols that Allah did not send authority for. The names have authority in the revelation, that is. So when you read the Quran, every name has a purpose or an objective or a maqsad of giving that name an authority. وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. Allah has created, Allah has taught Adam all the names. Why? Because a name means a certain meaning. It implies a certain reality. And a name could end up being a system or an institution. When we say zakah, it becomes a whole system. It becomes a whole system. When we say salah, when we talk about hajj, it's a name, but it implies a whole system of ibadah or a whole system of finance. The names are very important in the Quran. And the most important name to start with is the name of Allah. So therefore, Bismillah aims at putting that name in our hearts to start with. Even if you read the Quran according to the other order of revelation, اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. Read in the name of your Lord. Now, Allah is that name. Next, Ar-Rahman, another name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that gives us another value that we need to look at. Ar-Rahma, mercy. That's why mercy is the first thing that's mentioned after the name of Allah in the Quran, because mercy is so central in the Islamic objectives and the Islamic values, and we're going to discuss some of that. So therefore, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. So when I start the Quran, or when I start my prayers, and I say Bismillah, in the name of Allah, and then Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, I have Allah, and I have Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim as his name, subhanahu wa ta'ala, two different domains or attributes of Rahmah. And I have this mercy in my heart as I start. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Praise be to Allah. I am praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to start with. And that praise is linked to another objective, which is to thank Allah. That is the objective of taqwa, actually. Remember taqwa we talked about. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. Have taqwa so that you may thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So taqwa has an objective to thank Allah, and higher than thanking Allah is praising Allah, is to praise Him for everything that I perceive He gave me, or for His own attributes subhanahu wa ta'ala and His own existence. Alhamdulillah. Rabbil Alameen. Rabbil Alameen has an objective of opening a very important concept here, which is the universal laws of Allah. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala runs the universe. Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rabb min al-Rububiyyah. We translate in English simply as Lord, which is a very simple translation, but Rabba, Yurabbi, Tarbiyah, you know, when you deal with Tarbiyah, is to raise somebody in a certain way and to nurture, run the worlds and organize the worlds according to particular laws. So Rabbil Alameen, and Al-Alameen has to do with not just one world, but all the worlds that we know and we don't know. In the next page, the Quran will talk about the world of the seen and the unseen. So Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen aims at making me praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and acknowledge His laws and His management, if you wish, of the universe. And Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim is repeated here. So you mention Ar-Rahmah in 4 words. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, which actually is very significant in terms of Ar-Rahmah, in terms of why Ar-Rahmah is so significant in Al-Fatiha. And then Malik Yawmiddin, now reminding every person who reads that with the real life, which is the afterlife. Malik or Malik, however you read it, is the king or the owner or the master of that day, because we have kings on earth, but the king of that day is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the real one, the master of that day. Malik Yawmiddin. Allah is the owner of that day and everything in that day. And Allah is actually the owner of everything else. The Quran will tell us in many places how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the owner of the universe and of the heavens and the earth and so forth. So our ownership is a secondary ownership, because He is the real Malik subhanahu wa ta'ala. This though is a reminder of Yawmiddin particularly, which is a very important part, in fact, the most important part of life, the life that is after our life. And the perception of life as life in the dunya here, the lower life, and the higher life, or the purpose life, the end life, is actually meant from this verse, Maliki Yawmiddin. And then Iyaka na'budu wa Iyaka nasta'in. Those who know the Arabic language will see that we moved here from talking about Allah to talking to Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. They call it iltifat in the Arabic language, or a linguistic diversion from talking about Him, praise be to Allah, the most merciful, the master of the day of judgment, and then we turn to Him. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ. So the Quran, I'm giving you this as an example, when the style changes, when the style changes from talking about Allah to talking to Allah, that change of style is everywhere in the Quran, and it has objectives too. So not just the meanings where there is because or in order to words, but also the meaning in terms of the style of the Arabic language. And the Quranic Arabic is obviously a very different Arabic from even the prophetic Arabic. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. It is you whom we worship, and it is you alone whom we ask help. That links to ibadah that we talked about in the previous slides, where I showed you a number of verses that says that ibadah is an objective. Al-isti'ana is a major concept that we are dealing with here in terms of when you rely on Allah, when you seek His help, when you believe that He is the provider and He is the powerful, so forth. So إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. This opens everything in the rest of the Quran. Ibn al-Qayyim wrote a whole book about إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Madarij al-Salikin, for those who read it, I think it's translated in English, the stairways to the journey of the journey or something, where Ibn al-Qayyim is saying إِيَّاكَ Madarij al-Salikin في منازل إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. The different levels of إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, and he divided them into dozens of levels of ibadah and isti'ana. So there is a lot of knowledge if you start to link what you are reading and thinking about the why of what you are reading, and start to link these meanings to the other places in the Quran where there is where there are these concepts that we are talking about, and if you wish, the Maqasidi concepts, or the names or the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim, guide us to the straight path. And the straight path is related to ibadah as well. Jesus sallallahu alaihi wasallam eventually would say, "Abudullah rabbi rabbikum, inna Allah rabbi rabbikum fa'budu, hada siratun mustaqim." Ibadah is the straight path. And ibadah is much bigger than what we have in the popular culture of the rituals or the the rites. It's not just that, but it's a concept that encompasses everything in what we do. And therefore, we do everything in what we do seeking the straight path, seeking the path that we journey through towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not far. He said in the other verse, coming a few pages after that, or in Surah Al-Baqarah anyway, إِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. When my servants ask you about me, O Muhammad, tell them, I am near. So he is not far, but we are journeying to him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, on the straight path by changing ourselves, not by coming closer or further. And then we classify ourselves between, like in contrast of two groups, صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين, the path of those whom you have favored, not the path of those who earn your anger or your wrath, nor those who go astray. And therefore, a believer, as they read this, the purpose is to classify myself with those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed with belief and faith and so forth, not those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is angry with or have wrath upon because of their evil deeds, nor those whom went astray, and therefore they lost the way. Now, if we read the Fatiha and you have this in mind, you end up with a higher level kind of objective-based reading, because you are reading the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every word and every style of the structure of the sentences here, and every letter, and you ask why. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say this and not that? And why did he use this word? And what does this word mean? And when you start the Quran this way, you start with things that you don't really know. And eventually, the Quran starts to explain itself. And towards the end, you will start to see what you missed in the beginning. And the beginning, there is talk about the children of Israel. But who are they? And what are their stories? And what do we learn from them? Towards the end of the Quran, the picture will be clear about what Allah is telling us about the children of Israel, about the heaven and hell, about life and death, about the concepts that are core in Islam: as-salah, as-zakah, al-jihad, al-hajj, az-zawaj. Marriage is defined a particular way in the Quran, and throughout the Quran, there is a purpose to draw that picture for you so that you have what you need to know about marriage. And then the Prophet ﷺ explains more of that in a human form and in day-to-day kind of questions form. When you read throughout the Quran, you will see the ummah of Islam, the ummah. You will learn what Islam is, which is really the faith of every prophet, and so forth. So as you read, there are purposes that you will achieve by reading the Quran this way. And if you open yourself to that kind of reading, you are going to read the Quran with a different spirit. It is not looking particularly for the do's and the don'ts, but you will try to see the do's and the don'ts in everything. And the moral do's and the don'ts, and the spiritual do's and the don'ts, if you wish. You are not just looking for the grammar, and you are not just looking for particular partialistic kind of angles of looking at the Quran. But when you ask why, you will look at every dimension of it and every meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to give us through these words of His subhanahu wa ta'ala, that starts with this surah and ends all the way in Surah An-Nas. So this is what I guess time would allow now as an introduction, and what we can do in order to perhaps practice a little bit of that is to divide into groups. I think my sister here will tell you more about it, and to reflect what is required here is for every group to reflect upon the objectives, the direct objectives, and there are a number of them in the verses, and the implicit objectives that you might think when you reflect upon the Quran, you could see. Basic question, can I reflect upon the Quran? Of course. In fact, you are required to do that, and you are required to look for the objectives and ask why, and so forth. And this will open, inshallah, some knowledge. So when we come back, then we can discuss what you find in terms of the objectives in these verses, and I can add a few more comments, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
We want somebody to present for our group. So maybe as we go along, the other groups can think about who can present on their behalf. So we were group number 1. I think we were in room number 1. I hope that means group 1. So we'll have Brother Ahmed share some of our thoughts with the group. Brother Ahmed, go ahead, please, on behalf of us.
So everyone, please, everyone other than Brother Ahmed, please mute yourself.
And just beautiful. Remind us which verses you looked at.
Oh, sorry. Read it. Oh, Brother Ahmed can do that for us. Brother Ahmed, go ahead and recap.
So groups, rooms 1 and 2 went ahead with Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 183 to 189. They start by talking about كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامَ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. And then the verses go on, inshallah, to explain a few rules and regulations about it. So the Maqasid, and we were kind of lost getting started here. So the rough notes that I took down in regards to the first 2 verses, 183 and 184, was first and foremost to realize that we're part of a tradition. كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. The maqsad there was to clarify that this is not like only Muslims that are doing this. Rather, it's more like all believers are prescribed to fast. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, to achieve taqwa, that this is the maqsad of the Sawm for the nations that came before us and for our nation, the nation of Muslims. And then أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودَاتٍ فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ. So for this verse specifically, we kind of went in different directions. But I guess the one maqsad that I noted down, at least, was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts speaking about the conditions. فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ. So not just, it doesn't delve deeply into rules and regulations. It starts talking to the exceptions. And that's kind of, I think what I noted down here, not to make sure that no one feels left out when they're reading about Psalm, for those who might be sick or those who might be traveling. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to them directly and gives them the conditions for them that they can go ahead and start feeding those who are poor, or they can make up for that Psalm. So the maqsad there is not to have anyone feel left out. And then as another maqsad, it's clarifying that the mercy of or the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encompasses everyone, those who are fit to be able to fast and those who are not fit to fast. And then again, the reflecting or repeating the first verse, the maqsad there, وَأَن تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ, that at the end of this, the psalm is the best prescribed thing to achieve taqwa at the end.
Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair. If I may comment a little bit on that, actually it's very interesting. Like, first of all, let me say, answer the question: can we do that? Can we reflect upon the Quran? And actually, the answer is we are required to reflect upon the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. Won't they reflect upon that book? It is not really only the duty of scholars to reflect upon the Quran. It's actually every believer that is required to do that. Therefore, this exercise is legitimate, is fine. To give fatwa is a different story. It requires certain knowledge and certain skills. But just merely to reflect and feel that you are part of a tradition, you are going to acquire taqwa from the salah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so merciful. He did not speak about the rules before he spoke about the exceptions, so that people are not left out, and so forth. This is all what a believer should do when they read the Quran and they see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying there. I have an additional comment for a verse that you didn't get to because of the time, which is after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about these rules, as you see in the slide here, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا أَمْوَالَكُمْ بَيْنَكُمْ بِالْبَاطِلِ وَتُدْلُوا بِهَا إِلَى الْحُكَامِ. When I used to memorize this surah, I used to stop here and get confused because it's actually a different topic. I used to think it's a different topic, but it's actually not. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, and devour not or do not eat one another's possession wrongfully. وَتُدْلُوا بِهَا إِلَى الْحُكَامِ. Muhammad Asad says, neither employ legal artifices, but basically it's passing on this devoured or embezzled wealth to the rulers. Al-Hukam are the rulers. لِتَأْكُلُوا فَرِيقًا, so that you devour sinfully and knowingly anything that belongs to others. So in the middle of the ayat of the fasting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the prohibition of embezzling money. And he's actually using the word ta'kulu, eating the money. And this ties to fasting, really. So if you are going to fast from eating and drinking, you're not supposed to eat people's rights. It says not just eating the normal meals, but also to stop from eating people's rights. And that's why it fits here in that way. It's talking about public wealth and public money, and that rulers have no right to embezzle public money. It's a very important verse, and it's in the middle of the verses of fasting, which is actually interesting. And then the next verse is talking about al-ahilla, or the new moons, which are tied to the previous paragraph. So basically the why is, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala move from talking about fasting to talking about embezzling public wealth to talking about the new moons? These are different topics, but the thinking of how they are linked is the maqsid here, is the objective here, and it will make you really reflect. Another quick comment, kutiba alaykum, kutiba, kataba yaktubu, is actually one word of prescribe or require or oblige. But why did Allah use kataba because kataba means to be tied to it, to be committed to it. And actually, in the Arabic language, many of the words, especially the original Arabic word, like the ancient Arabic words, if you flip the word, it gives the opposite meaning. So kataba is to tie. Bataka is to cut or sever. Also in the Quran, so kataba is to really tie you, commit you to fasting, versus bataka, which is to cut you from that. So even the choice of the word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses has a meaning, has a purpose behind it, because its opposite has an opposite meaning. So inshallah, the second group. Jazakallah khair. Very interesting.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Bhavna. I was taking notes for the second group, and I'll be very quick because I know we're short on time. But given the reflections from different members in the group, I think I can just focus on two things. One is the theme of mercy. So the fact that fasting is only for a limited number of days, ma'dudat, like it's not like we're supposed to fast all year. This has to be our regular, routine all year long, is a mercy. Of course, the excuses that are given for people who don't have to fast is also a mercy. And then the mercy upon the people who are receiving fidya or whatever. So there's this whole theme of all this mercy that takes place during this month. And then the second theme is the theme of protection. Protection or taqwa. So of course we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Ramadan is prescribed for us so that we may attain taqwa. And then I was thinking of this also because in Ayah 187 it talks about libas, about how husbands and wives are libas for each other. And so libas, clothing, is a form of protection, and being able to be with each other is a form of protection from entering into the haram. And then also just making a connection with another surah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about libas al-taqwa. It just seems to all sort of connect that Ramadan and the things within it, things that are connected to it, are a form of protection for us. So I'll end it there.
Okay, let's take the various groups, inshallah, so we save time. Exactly.
For the third group, Assalamu alaikum. سورة الأنعام قل تعالوا أتل ما حرم ربكم عليكم. There are distinctly at the end of each ayah there's لعلكم تعقلون. So you might achieve comprehension and a state of being mindful and everything that is associated with a sound mind. And it's basically enumerating the different muharramat, so in the different ayahs. And the second one, لعلكم تذكرون, might you achieve dhikr or remembrance and being thoughtful and remembrant of Allah and His and the third ayah, لعلكم تتقون, so you might achieve piety and taqwa. The fifth ayah was about لعلهم بلقاء ربهم يؤمنون, so you might achieve iman in the day in the hereafter. And the fourth one, لعلكم ترحمون, so you might achieve rahmah or mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So basically, but we didn't really kind of correlate the different actions to the specific لعلكم that's in this in the each individual ayah. It was kind of a little bit deeper, and we didn't have time. So why specifically, the ألا تشركوا بي شيئا بالوالدين إحسانا وتقتلوا, why is that specifically tied to تعقلون, and why are the following ones are specifically tied to تذكرون and so on? So we didn't need, and that's one of the things that really makes me think when I read this ayat. That's it. Is there anything else, Brother Jasser?
Oh, Doctor, you're muted. Okay.
جزاكم الله خيرا. Next إن شاء الله. جزاكم الله خير. بارك الله فيكم. إن شاء الله.
Group number 4, inshallah.
Yeah.
Rami?
Assalamu alaikum. I believe we had the same ayat for Surah Al-An'am. And it was, we sort of got, I don't want to repeat what Al-Akh Osama mentioned already, but those were the maqasid that we sort of identified are at the end of each ayah, the idea of the fact that you'd attain understanding through the certain actions that were mentioned of being kind to your parents, not killing your offspring, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who provides for them, not you, and not approaching al-fawahish and killing unjustly. And then in the following ayah is the theme or the concept of justice that's tied to the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So being just with the wealth of the orphans, being just in transactions with others, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explaining that these are normal things. They shouldn't be a burden on you because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't cause a burden greater than one can bear. And that and applying justice in very difficult circumstances, which include testifying against al-qurba, the one who is very close to you, not just a relative or someone you know, but someone who you have a deep emotional and potential and a blood relation to, that you would only want to see, for example, benefit come to them and not harm. And yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking you that if you are to have remembrance of Allah, then you must have this concept of justice. And then leading to the other, the following two ayat, which includes staying on the straight path in order to attain taqwa, and then finally the concept of achieving iman and then mercy. And personally, I just saw this as an arc of like leading from attaining understanding to being able to attain remembrance through the application of understanding by being just, and then finally being following the straight path and attaining that taqwa, so that ultimately we can attain Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can attain iman and true iman, and hence Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. Wa jazakum Allah khair.
Jazakumullah khairan, barakallahu feekum. Inshallah. Next, group 5, I think.
Group 5 did what group 9 was supposed to do, so maybe we'll move to group 6, inshallah.
Group 5 or group 6?
Group 6, please.
Let's do 6.
No, we did not change. We were just asking. We stayed as group 5. What's the sign?
Okay, so go ahead. Go ahead, group 5, inshallah.
Okay. Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum. Read the verses in Surah Ibrahim. So there's one example of an explicit purpose. Allah says about He gives a metaphor of the tree for the kalima tayyiba, and He says لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَذَكَّرُونَ. So reminder, purpose of the metaphor or the example is to as a reminder. The other examples are all implicit. So Allah uses the metaphor to teach us the purpose of kalima tayyiba, the good word, whether it's a shahada or more than that. And Allah says the example of a tree that giving the kind of the sense that part of the purpose of the good word is to give in terms of good deeds. Also, if you go further in the verses, at the end of the verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِينَ بَدَّلُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ كُفْرًا. Allah talks about those who turn the bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into disbelief, into rejection or ingratitude, kind of implying that part of the purpose of Allah's bounty upon us is for us to be grateful and show the gratitude in it. And I think those are the main ones that we had.
Jazakallah khair.
Do we have group 6?
Group 6. Or perhaps group 7.
I believe we were group 7. We're doing Surah An-Nahl verses 5 through 18. And just anybody in my group, please speak up to supplement what I'm saying. I missed anything, but basically these ayat show man his dependence on Allah by showing us the mechanics of life through examples that a common man could relate to, the cow, navigating, etc. And it starts from our origin, our like literal origin, and then goes through the things that are common to us that we use in daily life, and then it goes to the blessings of nature. And every ayat has a reason for what Allah is talking about that particular example. And subhanAllah, the direct objective, I think, in all of these is explicit in ayah 13 or 14, that we may be grateful, that man may be grateful. And then in ayah 15 and 16 is so that we may be guided. We may be grateful and then guided to Allah. And the implicit objective that we came up with is that these ayat show us that man can use his reason to reach Allah. And that's referenced in ayat 11, which is, subhanAllah, it's an amazing thing that Allah has allowed us to use our reason to reach Him, He who is beyond the strictures of our reason. So our limited tools to reach the unlimited. But that's what we got. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair, mashallah. Group 8. Group
8, yeah.
Can I just add that was group 8? Sorry, we skipped. We were group 8.
Sorry,
so we just went, yeah, that's okay. So you need 7, I think.
Okay. Anybody else left out? Please go ahead.
We have group 10 for sure, but if we have 7, they can go ahead.
Yeah.
Group 6 is also calling out. Reem, group 6 is calling out to present as well, inshallah. Yeah. So maybe whoever is ready should just present.
Whoever is ready, inshallah, could just jump in. 3 more left. Well,
we know those of you that haven't presented. Go ahead.
Group 6 or 10, please go ahead.
Tasneem?
Okay, assalamu alaikum. معكم Rima and Omar from group 6.
So one of the things that wasn't covered, the previous group did a great job of covering some of the themes that we talked about. We had the verses about the good word or kalima tayyiba. But just a reflection is that when the believers are entered into gardens of paradise, that tahiyyatuhum fiha salam, and then right after that, so they greet one another with a beautiful word, which is peace, right? So we talked about the futuristic outlook. That's what's going to happen when entering paradise. But then even in this dunya, the kalima tayyiba is there. It's like a tree that's deeply rooted and it bears fruits, positive things. And on the contrary, you have a tree that lacks deep roots. It's superficial. And similarly, when someone kind of covers the truth, they lack that substance, and they just try to justify that covering of the truth. And so we talked about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the believers kind of that steadfastness, and the word that's used is يُثَبِّتُ اللَّهُ, and the qawl, right, bil qawl al-thabit. So that's going back to kind of the deeply rooted tree.
So I think we can move to team 10.
Assalamualaikum. So we didn't really get to discuss a lot. We had quite a few technical problems, but subhanAllah, these ayats are very explicit in kind of what they are saying. So some of the things that we discussed for reference, we covered Surah Al-Rum, ayahs 41 to 48. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins straight off the bat by telling us the reason for the corruption. He says that like the corruption has come upon the land because of what people have done to themselves, and to show people just a part of what they're done. And then he continues to say that then we should be turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to his straight deen, so that we may achieve goodness. Sorry. And then he continues and he says, you know, whoever has been misguided, then upon him is his misguidance. It's kind of a very clear purpose that we are all accountable for our deeds, and we will be, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only accounts us for what we have done. And then he kind of goes a little implicitly talking about his rahmah that he has sent upon us, and when he talks about the breeze, and when he talks about how he has allowed ships to sail, and how he has allowed the clouds to move about, and that it's a mercy and a good tidings for the people, you know, for the rain and for the blessings to come. So that is basically what we got to cover.
If I may share a few final things, I mean, the time there, inshallah. So, Jazakumullah khair, this is quite enlightening, and this is very interesting. And you can see this brief exercise, whether the brief time that I had to open a few points or the brief time that we had to discuss, we start to build basically webs of meaning. I'm opening here a screen for you that has to do with the research. I'm not sure if it will come here. I hope it does. The research that we do in the Maqasid Institute in building the networks of meaning of the Quran in terms of the Maqasid of the Quran. So basically, if you take any of these nodes, you will find that al-taqwa, al-rahmah, the al-ibadah, you know, and then the different concepts and the different sunan or the universal laws. Next time I'll elaborate more on this kind of thinking, where the believer, when you reflect upon the Quran like that, it builds a certain conceptual world in your mind and a certain world of meanings that is unique, that builds your belief and builds your personality and identity and builds who you are, how you define the world and your outlook at the world. Not just the ethical outlook, of course ethical is part of it, but the philosophical outlook, the conceptual outlook, how you view the world and what and how you read it and the meaning of your existence and so forth. That is something that a believer gets from reading the Quran and reflecting upon it. And these networks of meaning, we're building them here for the sake of research and so forth, in order for groups of researchers to collaborate and so on. This is still under construction. This is, internal information I'm sharing with you in terms of that. We haven't launched that website yet. But basically, other than doing research and exploring the meanings, in my own mind, in my own heart, the Quran, every time I go through it in a cycle of reflection, what we call cycles of reflection, I get a different and a clearer picture of myself and of the universe. And the purposes start to connect and give me this futuristic, holistic, critical outlook and view of the world that will allow me, inshallah, to have a better perception and therefore a better action, because an action is based on a perception and coming from a framework. And building that framework is very important for me to go on in life based on the purposes that I learn. I hope that this session, however limited time we have, was useful. Inshallah, next time we start from here. We start from this network of meaning, and we try to look at themes of the Quran that have to do with what I call the methodological purposes. So basically the purposes of methodology, the objectives that have to do with building that framework. So it's kind of a more like higher level talk, but hopefully we are able to see the relevance of this for building our organizations and our scholarship from the core outwards. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept. Jazakumullah khair. I'm really impressed at the amount of reflections that you were able to achieve in this short time and over Zoom. Alhamdulillah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of you. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakumullah khair, Doctor. Thank you so much. And we recognize that the time has gone. However, we want to, if it's okay, to close with a little dua for the barakah of our company here today. If you can give us just a closing dua, inshallah, and may Allah reward you.
Inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma ighfir lil-mu'minina wal-mu'minat wal-muslimina wal-muslimat al-ahya'i minhum wal-amwat. إنك يا مولانا سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات. اللهم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا عيبا إلا سترته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا مرضا إلا شفيته ولا مبتلا إلا عافيته ولا مريضا إلا شفيته ولا حاجة هي لك رضا ولنا فيها صلاح إلا قضيتها يا كريم. اللهم إنا نسألك إيمانا صادقا ويقينا دائما وعلما نافعا وقلبا خاشعا ونورا ساطعا ورزقا واسعا وشفاء من كل داء وغنيمة من كل بر ونجاة من كل إثم وتوبة من كل ذنب. اللهم إنا نعوذ برضاك من سخطك وبعفوك من عقوبتك ونعوذ بك منك لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Thank you, everyone. Inshallah, we'll see you next time. We do have a WhatsApp group. Let's keep in touch through that group. I think some people didn't get a chance to join. Check your emails, reach out to Sister Iman or I. We can add you to the group, and inshallah we can communicate. And Doctor, maybe we'll add you as well too in case we have questions through the week or things of that nature.
Add me, I'll answer any question. Please connect with me over the WhatsApp group, over WhatsApp. No problem, inshallah.
So we'll add you to the group as well, mashallah.
More than welcome. I'll send my email as well, as you wish, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you, everyone. Inshallah. Ramadan Kareem. Sister Iman, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, inshallah, maybe next time, if there are verses, inshallah, we will join with distribute them earlier to the group so they can reflect upon them before the meeting, inshallah.
Inshallah, inshallah. And I'll make them shorter so they can get something done in the 20 minutes.
Thank you, Doctor. May Allah reward you. Thank you, everyone. May Allah reward you. Awesome your prayers, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.